The Corvan enforcer ship descended through the orange clouds of Nexus Prime like a predator stalking wounded prey. Commander Veltris watched the human colony below through his sensor array. 3,000 humans lived in that settlement. They had built homes from local materials. They had raised children under alien stars. They had planted crops in foreign soil and dared to call it their own. None of that mattered to the Corvani Dominion. Veltris activated his communication array and broadcast a standard message. His voice echoed across every emergency channel in the settlement. The humans had 30 standard minutes to gather in the central square. They would present their identification codes. They would submit to physical inspection. Any resistance would result in immediate termination. Any delay would result in collective punishment. This was how it had been for 70 years. The Corvani Dominion controlled 47 star systems. They held absolute authority over 200 billion souls across 1,000 worlds. Humanity occupied 12 small colonies within their territory. The enforcers kept order among these lesser species. They collected taxes and tributes. They punished those who broke Dominion law. Sometimes they punished those who broke no law at all. Fear was a tool. Suffering was a reminder. Down in the settlement, a young girl named Sarah watched the massive ship through her bedroom window. She was only 8 years old. She did not understand politics or galactic treaties or the complicated history between species. She only understood that her mother was crying in the kitchen and her father was gathering their documents with shaking hands. The Corvani stood 8 feet tall on average. Their skin was dark blue and covered in hard overlapping scales. Their 4 muscular arms ended in razor-sharp claws that could tear through steel. They had evolved as apex predators on a death world where everything tried to kill everything else. They had conquered 17 sentient species before humans ever reached the stars. They believed the galaxy belonged to them by right of strength. Weakness was sin. Mercy was foolishness. Veltris led his enforcement squad into the settlement an hour later. The humans had gathered as commanded. They stood in neat rows with their heads bowed and their hands visible at all times. This was how conquered species behaved. This was proper submission. The commander had seen it on 100 worlds. He had taught it to 12 races. The commander walked slowly through the silent crowd. His claws clicked against his ceremonial armor with each step. He stopped in front of a human male who stood slightly taller than the others. The human's name was Marcus Chun. He was the settlement's elected leader. His title meant nothing to the Dominion. "Your tribute is short this cycle," Veltris said. His translator converted his growling speech into flat human words. "The Dominion requires explanation for this failure." Marcus kept his eyes firmly on the ground. He had learned long ago that meeting a Corvani's gaze was considered a direct challenge. Challenges ended badly for humans. They always ended badly. "The harvest failed, honored commander. A local fungus destroyed 40% of our crops before we could contain it. We sent everything we could spare. Every last grain." Veltris considered this explanation for a long moment. He knew it was true. His sensors had confirmed the crop damage before he even landed. His orbital scans showed the dead fields stretching across the valley. But truth did not matter to the Dominion. Order mattered. Example mattered. Other colonies were watching. "The shortage will be taken from your population," Veltris announced loudly so everyone could hear. 20 workers will return with us to the mining colonies on Grath 7. They will serve until the debt is paid in full. A sound rippled through the gathered humans. It was not quite a cry and not quite a protest. It was quieter and deeper than either. It was the sound of hearts breaking. Everyone knew about the mining colonies. The conditions were brutal beyond imagination. The work was dangerous and endless. No human had ever returned from them alive. Sarah's father stepped forward from the crowd. His name was David, and he was a simple farmer who grew vegetables and raised chickens. He had never been brave. He had never been a fighter or a hero. But his daughter was standing behind him, clutching her mother's hand, and something inside him refused to bend any further. "Please," David said with a trembling voice, "take extra from next year's harvest. Double the tribute if you must. But don't take our people away. We need every hand to rebuild what we lost. Without enough workers, more of us will starve next winter." Veltris turned slowly to face the human who had dared to speak without permission. His four eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. His claws extended slightly from their sheaths. The ceremonial armor hummed with barely contained power. For a long moment, the entire square held its breath. The enforcer struck without any warning. His armored fist connected with David's jaw and sent the farmer spinning to the ground. Blood sprayed across the dusty earth. Several teeth clattered against the stones. Sarah screamed and broke free from her mother to run to her father's side. "Submission," Veltris growled to the crowd. "You speak only when spoken to. You accept whatever is given to you. You exist only because we allow it to be so. Remember your place." David spat blood onto the ground and slowly looked up at the towering commander. For the first time in his entire life, he did not look away from those four terrible eyes. Something had changed in him. It was small and quiet and fragile, but it was there like a spark in dry wood. Veltris had seen it before in other conquered species. It always came just before he had to make painful examples. One day, David whispered through broken teeth, "Things will be different." Veltris laughed at the words. The sound was harsh and mechanical and utterly without humor. "Humans have threatened us for 70 years. Your kind is weak. You are soft creatures from a soft world. You will never be anything more than servants and slaves to your betters." The commander selected his 20 workers without care or consideration. He separated families without a second thought. He loaded the crying prisoners onto his ship like cargo bound for market. And then he departed into the orange clouds, leaving behind broken hearts and buried rage. That was 30 years ago. Commander Veltris sat in his private quarters aboard the enforcer ship Dominance. He was much older now. His scales had faded from dark blue to dull gray. His movements were slower than they once were, but he still served the Dominion faithfully. He still kept order in the human territories. His communication array activated with an urgent priority signal. Veltris frowned and accepted the transmission with growing annoyance. The face of a young Corvani officer appeared on his screen. The young one looked frightened. "Commander, we have detected unknown vessels approaching Corvin Prime. The profile does not match any registered species in our database." Veltris straightened in his chair with sudden concern. "How many vessels are we talking about?" The young officer hesitated visibly. His four eyes blinked rapidly with nervous energy. 3,000 confirmed ships, Commander. They emerged from hyperspace 12 minutes ago in perfect formation. 3,000 ships. Veltris felt something cold spraying through his chest. It was something he had not experienced in centuries of service. It took him a moment to recognize the sensation as genuine fear. "Show me everything," he commanded. The display shifted to show the Corvin home system in tactical view. The sacred world of his ancestors hung blue and beautiful against the infinite stars. And surrounding it like a swarm of angry insects were more warships than Veltris had ever seen gathered in one place. They were human vessels. The lead ship was unlike anything recorded in the Corvani military database. It stretched nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was covered in weapons arrays and sensor domes and armor plating. Power readings were off every scale. The words painted on its side were visible even from extreme orbital distance. Terran Imperial Dreadnought Justice. Veltris stood from his chair so quickly that he knocked over his ceremonial drink. The glass shattered on the floor. Human ships. Human weapons. Human technology that should not exist. Humans had come to Corvin Prime itself. A communication request flashed urgently on his screen. Veltris accepted it with trembling claws. The face that appeared was human. She was middle-aged with gray streaks running through her dark hair. Her uniform was crisp and professional and covered in medals and insignia that Veltris did not recognize. But he recognized something deeper in her cold eyes. He had seen those exact eyes before, 30 years ago, looking up at him from a dusty colonial square. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Imperial Navy," the human said. Her voice was perfectly calm and utterly cold. "We are here to discuss the future of your entire species." Veltris felt his 3 hearts racing wildly. "This is an unprovoked act of war. The Dominion will crush you for this insult. We have controlled this region of space for 3,000 years. Admiral Chun smiled slowly at his words. It was not a friendly expression. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. "Your enforcement fleets are currently surrounded at 17 different locations throughout your territory. Your military installations have been targeted by precision strikes. Your communication networks are completely jammed. And your planetary defense grid went offline 4 minutes ago. Check if you don't believe me." The commander tried to speak, but no words came out. He had spent his entire career teaching humans to submit and bow and break. He had never imagined they could ever do anything like this. 30 years ago, Admiral Chun continued, "your kind took my father for the mining colonies. He died there within a single year from exhaustion and exposure. But before he died, he managed to send me one final message. He told me to be patient. He told me to be strong. He told me that one day, things would be different." Veltris remembered that day with sudden terrible clarity. He remembered the farmer who had spoken out of turn. He remembered the small girl who had screamed when he struck her father down. He had not thought of them once since that moment. They had been nothing important to him. Just more humans. Just more servants and slaves. "We spent 30 years building in secret," Admiral Chun said. "We developed new technologies in hidden facilities throughout unmonitored space. We trained our soldiers in bases you never found. We united every single human colony under one banner. And when we were finally ready, we moved against you. Your enforcer patrols started disappearing 6 months ago. You assumed they were routine equipment failures. You were completely wrong." The display behind Admiral Chun shifted to show detailed tactical data. Corvan military assets were marked in red across the star map. Human positions were marked in blue. The blue forces outnumbered the red by a factor of 10 to 1. "Your species now has a simple choice," Admiral Chun stated. "You can surrender unconditionally and accept Terran oversight of your territories. You will release every single enslaved worker. You will pay full reparations to every species you have ever conquered. You will submit to the same laws you forced upon so many others." Veltris found his voice at last. "And if we refuse your terms?" Admiral Chun's expression did not change even slightly. "Then your homeworld will watch its entire fleet burn in orbit. Your colonies will fall one by one. Your species will learn exactly what it truly means to be conquered." The communication ended abruptly. Veltris stood completely alone in his quarters as alarms began sounding throughout the entire ship. He could hear his crew running desperately through the corridors. He could feel the vibrations of weapon systems activating. But he knew in his heart it was all pointless. The humans had planned this for decades. They had waited and prepared and grown strong while his people grew fat and complacent. The Dominion had always believed that conquered species stayed conquered forever. They had never once considered that humans might be fundamentally different. 3 days later, the Corvani Dominion surrendered completely. Admiral Chun stood on the observation deck of her flagship and watched as Corvani warships powered down their weapons one by one. Across 47 star systems, the same scene was repeating itself. The mightiest empire the galaxy had ever known was bowing to a species they had long dismissed as weak and soft. A young officer approached the admiral with a communication pad. "Ma'am, the provisional government is requesting detailed instructions." They want to know exactly how we will administer the occupied territories going forward. Admiral Chun took the pad and carefully reviewed the prepared documents. Her staff had prepared detailed plans over many years. Fair governance based on representation, civil rights for all species, economic rebuilding and investment. They would not treat the Kovani the way the Kovani had treated them. That was simply not the human way. "Tell them we will begin immediately," she said. "The enforcers policed our territories with cruelty and fear for decades. The Imperial fleet will police theirs with proper law and real justice. We will show them that there is another way to build civilization." The officer nodded respectfully and departed. Sarah Chun remained alone at the observation window for a long time. Somewhere down there on Corvin Prime, the commander who had killed her father was sitting in a detention cell awaiting trial. He would face proper justice for his many crimes. He would answer for the thousands of lives he had ruined over his long career. But Sarah did not feel burning hatred when she thought of him. She felt something closer to pity. The Kovani had built their entire civilization on raw strength and endless conquest. They had never understood that true strength came from unity and shared purpose. They had never learned that the species they called weak and soft could become something far greater when pushed too far. Her father had somehow known the truth. He had seen it clearly even on that terrible day when all seemed utterly lost. He had looked directly into the face of his oppressor and spoken simple words of truth. One day, things would be different. And now they finally were. The Terran Imperial fleet spread out across the former Dominion territories. They freed every single slave. They rebuilt the devastated colonies. They brought proper order to chaos and genuine hope to despair. And throughout the galaxy, other watching species stared in amazement as the humans proved that victory did not require cruelty. The enforcers had policed human territories with iron claws and cold hearts for generations. The Imperial fleet policed theirs with open hands and unwavering resolve. And the galaxy would never forget which way truly worked better.